Joining me now is NFL Network, Fox, Sky, and Odyssey NFL analyst Brian Baldinger. Baldy, thanks so much for taking the time to do a little bit of pre-draft breakdown. I know you've been diving into the film. Let's just dive right into it. The Giants have the 5th and 7th pick in the NFL draft in 2022. What are you thinking this team needs to do with those spots?
Well, I think you got to consider all the options, Madelyn. But I mean, if you just stay there at number 5 and number 7, what a lot of people have been suggesting, an offensive tackle would look really good. It looks like right tackle is a glaring need to me. And there's a couple in this draft that might be there with the 5th pick, maybe the 7th. But, Evan Neal, Ike Ekwonu, the big Ick, all those guys look like they could step in their opposite of Andrew Thomas, and this offense might look a little bit better. You might be able to see what Daniel Jones can do a little bit more, and maybe what Saquon and some of the receivers, I think everything could look a lot better for Brian Daboll's offense if they had a really solid right tackle right now.
Absolutely. And, looking at this right tackle class, and you mentioned some of those names, is there a favorite for you? Is there a clear best tackle? It seems people have varying opinions.
I feel like Ike has kind of separated himself a little bit because of just the explosive plays that you see from him, especially in the run game, his ability to take people off the ball. But I happen to be an Evan Neal fan. I like big people. Madelyn, just gravitate towards him. He's a big man. He's over 6'7". He's 337 pounds. He's started 41 games in a row. And I don't know, if I'm the Giants right now, Madelyn, durability has got to be important to me.
Joe Schoen in his pre-draft press conference mentioned, I'm content staying at 5 and 7, but he admitted he's getting calls, and as one does leading up to the draft, about moving off of one of those spots. If you're the Giants general manager, what do you need to make it an absolute yes to a deal to move off of one of those top 10 picks?
Well, there's a value chart, and sometimes that's an equitable exchange if you're dropping down a certain amount of slots. And you can kind of figure out what the compensation could be. It's rarely disagreed upon when two teams decide to make a trade. There's two ways of going about it, Madelyn. You can do it before the draft in the next 8 days, or you can do it during the draft. Some people like the excitement of doing it during the draft. It adds something to the room. You feel like, especially when you can come out and get the player that you targeted, yet move down and gain extra picks. That's the dream of trading down, is to ultimately get the guy that you targeted all along and acquiring extra picks. If you could do that, that's usually pretty much a grand slam. But they could be done prior to the draft, and it could be done during the draft.
Absolutely. Now, when you're looking at the draft as a whole, is there a player that stands out to you that is the number one unequivocal overall pick? Because it seems like that's another question that seems to have a lot of varying opinions.
I did the Big Ten championship game this year, and I got a chance to see Aiden Hutchinson play live. And it's hard for me to believe, when you have to consider all the things you do, talent, durability, production, that he isn't the best player in this draft. I can say that Jermaine Johnson looks really talented at times, or Walker looks really, really enticing, I could name a bunch of other guys, but I just don't believe that there's a better player than Aiden Hutchinson. And I think that's what we're going to see come next Thursday night. I think Aiden Hutchinson will be the first player off the board. I don't think Jacksonville is going to get away from that.
Looking at this draft, too, the wide receiver class seems to be perennially becoming a class of deeper and deeper value. When it's such a deep position, does that kind of take away from the early round favorite of it, or is it just that the receivers are kind of becoming so much more prominent in later rounds?
It really depends on how you like to build your teams. If you look at the Rams, they just won the Super Bowl, so you look at them and there's Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods was a second round pick, and Odell Beckham is coming off an injury, and he was obviously the Giants' first round pick. Some teams just believe you can find Cooper Kupp and he could be the best receiver in football, or the Buffalo Bills could, invest in Stephon Diggs, from the Minnesota Vikings and trade for him, and he could be the best receiver in football. I don't believe that you have to go the route of first-round pick always for a wide receiver. If you look at Odell Beckham's year, it was a great year for wide receivers. Sammy Watkins and Mike Evans and Odell, but, the ninth receiver taken that year was Devontae Adams. And so you could say, well, Devontae might be the best of all of them, if you want to look at it like that. And he was a mid-second round pick. So I believe that you can find players at that position without spending high first round picks. It doesn't diminish the position. There's 8 or 10 guys that you have to sort of separate in this draft. They're all worthy, but the college game is a lot different than the NFL game.
Yeah, and it's tough to translate too, I'd imagine. I mean, one other question is that, we've got these 2 first-round picks that we're focusing on really, but the Giants hold 9 draft picks overall. And looking at some of the later rounds, how important is it to kind of find value in those later rounds? We know plenty of stars in this league that are coming from a 3rd round, a 5th round pick. Is there, some intangible that you look for in some of these later round guys?
Well, I mean, when you look at, later rounds or mid-round guys that are successful, I mean, the love of the game usually jumps out. If you look at Max Crosby, who 4 years ago was a 4th round pick out of Eastern Michigan, you can't deny watching Max Crosby play on any game how much he loves the game. He doesn't even want to come off the field. So that's usually what drives a player from the middle rounds to becoming a great player. It's just the overall love and the commitment to the game. And so you can make up whatever perceived lack of talent or ability there is with just that quality. And we all wish we could investigate that more fully when we look at these guys, but that's part of it. And then, sometimes guys get caught up. If you look at a tight end like Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, he really wasn't used that much at Ohio State as a pass receiver. He played a lot. Just they didn't, they had these talented wide receivers, that were there, and they had really talented running backs. So he wasn't really asked to do a lot, but you could see like this guy is going to be a good NFL player. Like he runs good enough, and he's got good size, and he likes to block. And like everybody needs a true Y tight end on the roster.
Love what you do, never work a day in your life is what they say. Brian Baldinger, I know you love what you do. You take deep dives into that film, and I really appreciate you taking the time and giving us some insight.